All right, so the very last idea came to define the classic term for sage. In Judaism, a classic term that's existed for thousands of years, and that's the term of Talmid Chacham, which, as mentioned, refers to a sage, but the literal translation of Talmid Chacham means a student of wisdom. We said that the Greek philosophers almost tried to copy that term, but I think in a very different way because their sages are called philosophers. Philosophers means the lovers of wisdom, right? If you recall. Um, and love is an interesting word because in every I love you, as Rabbi Steinsaltz would say, there's an I. Love is a little bit egotistic. When you say Talmid Chacham, that you're a student of wisdom, you have to nullify your I in order to be able to absorb the wisdom that you are trying to receive. So it's a much more selfless term. And it has other differences too. But when one becomes indeed nullified, and that's really the topic here of chapter 18, nullified, so that not that he nullifies himself, but that he nullifies his ego to be his true self, which is the divine self, so that that divine self can become one with God, then one becomes so aligned that in many ways he or she represents God in this world. Because then what that person does is certainly what God wishes that person to do, and therefore he becomes a channel for godliness. Same for the words that one says. When I'm completely aligned with God, there is zero ego, and I align my every word, my every thought, my every action with God, then again, I become that fluid conduit for godliness. And that is why, as we mentioned in the previous paragraph, that the Talmud says that one who brings bikurim, first fruits, one had to bring, one of the 613 commandments is that you have to bring your first fruits to God, simply as a sign of gratitude. To say that thank you, Hashem, for partnering with me in making this fruit tree grow and in making these fruits produce themselves. We can't do it alone. We can water the tree and we could do but you still need Hashem. You still need the seasons that are certainly only guided by Hashem to grow those fruits. So as a sign of gratitude, we would give those first fruits to Hashem and really proclaim a proclamation of gratitude. Now, that would happen when we had the Jerusalem temple. What do we do today? So the Talmud says today you have to bring them to a Talmid Chacham, a sage. Why? Because a Talmid Chacham is such a student of wisdom, of God's wisdom, that he becomes completely aligned with it. He nullifies his ego and he's completely aligned with that wisdom to the point that the wisdom is not just there to align his mind, as many people treat wisdom. People think that wisdom is only for our minds, to make us more intellectual, more clever. But no, the divine wisdom is to also influence most importantly, our actions, and certainly our words, our emotions, and our entire being. And when a person becomes that ultimate student of that wisdom, where his entire being now becomes a conduit, as we said, then he represents God. And therefore, the Talmud says you're allowed to bring the first fruits to student of wisdom, to Talmid Chacham, because he represents God in the best of ways. So that's the idea we're speaking about. Again, the nullification of one's ego in order to allow for God to reside, because with the ego, God can't reside. You take up the whole space. So obviously, there's no room for God. But with the nullification of the ego and that tremendous effort to align our thoughts, our words, and our actions with God, then we allow for ourselves to become that ultimate conduit of godliness. And really, that's the goal. That's the goal of the Beinoni. It's the goal of should be the goal of every human being. And that's what we're talking about here. And again, that goal is personified by the Talmid Chacham. Let's continue, bottom of page 100. Unless there's comments, again, please feel free. Again, remember, this is real learning, so it needs to be a two-way street. But otherwise, let's continue, bottom of page 100. There is a statement. Does anyone want to read? Anyone?
I'll read if nobody else wants to.
Okay, please. Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
Thank you.
There is a statement attributed to the author of the Tanya that a Jew never became an apostate, a Gentile never converted to Judaism. Any Jew who converts demonstrates that he is not in essence Jewish, and every Gentile who converts was not really a Gentile. This
Mhm.
statement perhaps undermines genetic concepts, yet it defies unequivocally who a Jew is. Someone who has by nature and by birth a spark of holiness, regardless of his place, condition, and status. And the proof is that when the moment of truth arrives, he will decide at whatever cost that he belongs to God.
Right. So we see that both ways that, true converts were never real Gentiles. They were always Jews. Jews that were yet waiting to reveal their Jewishness to the world, but they always had a Jewish soul. That's also why we say that, Midrash says that all souls all souls of the Jewish people, when God gave us the Torah, Mount Sinai, were there. Um, Souls of the past and souls of the future. We were there. And it also says that the souls of the converts were there because they really are Jews. They just, through their conversion, they revealed their Judaism. Now, this is true for a Jew, God forbid, becomes an apostate or completely denounces his Judaism with complete apathy and indifference to Judaism. I don't know of many Jews like that. Many Jews who did uh, converted for all sorts of reasons. Some historical, like the Marranos in Spain. I don't think we're allowed to call them Marranos anymore, but that was the name. Um, some for personal traumatic decisions, the feelings and reasons. But so I don't know if there's such a concept of a Jew became a true apostate, because as he mentions here, we've seen that time and time again in history, that when push comes to shove, and even the most seemingly disconnected, there's no such thing, but seemingly disconnected Jew, because we're always connected. This the fifth level of the soul, like we spoke about, is always connected, but a seemingly disconnected Jew is faced with I don't know, with death, and all of a sudden you see that these Jews are shouting Shema Israel or are expressing their out of faith in God out of nowhere. So we see that statement, as harsh as it may be, is very true. We've seen that again, time and time again in history, and it represents really our truest self, our deepest, truest self. That truest self, again, that fifth level of the soul that is never disconnected. The big question, though, which is really the theme again of this portion of this chapter, chapter 18, is whether we're able to not just reveal that truest self in times of tremendous peril, but whether we're able to live with it, even in our day to day. I think, by the way, if I may add, this is why, and the Tanya, I think, was very intentional about this, the author of the Tanya, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. But um, this is maybe why this theme or this idea is expressed in chapter 18. 18, as we all know, is Chai, life, because in many ways, the author of the Tanya is trying to teach us how to live with that fifth level of the soul on a day-to-day. Chai. It's not just about, showing up with it in times of peril or times of tremendous spiritual moments and awakenings. It's the day to day, how you bring it to the details of life, to your routines, to the moods that may be negative, to the times in which you feel lazy. That's when it should show up. Um, that's really the ideal. By the way, there's another chapter, one of my favorites, but chapter 26. 26, just to go into it a little bit more. Tanya really is an essential book in my eyes, but 26 is an essential chapter in the essential book. 26 in Hebrew stands for the name of God. The name of God, Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, has the numerical value of 26. And I think that's why he wrote what he wrote in chapter 26, which really is about the essence of the essences, overcoming obstacles, overcoming sadness, the tremendous duty to be happy. Another chapter, and I'll just end with this example, but chapter 32 is a chapter about loving your fellow as yourself and how to achieve that. And 32 in Hebrew is a numerical value of the word lev, which means heart, because that chapter teaches you how to have a heart that loves, a heart that knows how to love. So I think it's quite intentional. So going back to what life means showing up with your fifth level of the soul, with your connection that may be shattered or may be shaken throughout life, but still knowing that first and foremost that that's your true self, nothing else. And number two, that because it's your true self, you should show up with it every day, every moment of the day. Please try. Anyway, so that's the idea. Let's please feel free to speak up. I know some of you are muted, so you can unmute yourselves and speak up. Otherwise, we'll continue at the top of page 101. But again, please feel free to speak your mind.
Rabbi,
Yes,
I,
please,
I
William.
I would disagree with you
Okay,
when you say that um, some Jews convert only because of uh, external factors. Um, as a prime example, I could give you the chief rabbi of Rome during World War II,
yeah,
who hid out in the Vatican and converted to Catholicism.
right,
And not only that, he
yeah,
began to preach and to try to convert after the war.
right. Yeah, yeah, and you had the same story in Greece also, in Saloniki particularly. Um, yeah, I didn't say only for because of external factors. I said for external and internal factors like trauma, people's personal traumas, people's personal fears and insecurities. But I think, like as mentioned, every Jew, true Jew, right, who who's faced with ultimate test, something in him or in her wakes up. And that's indicative of who that person truly was all the time, yet wasn't revealed, right? But yeah, these are stories that are just devastating. But um, other stories like that in the times of the Spanish Inquisition too, in the times of peril. Look, they were faced with things that we can't even fathom. So I don't know if we can judge them, even though the outcome was horrible. But
But I have to give some of them the benefit of the doubt. Some
right,
of them do it
okay,
for their simple beliefs. I'll give them the benefit of doubt.
right, okay, right, yeah, yeah. But that's why I'd rather have this uh, statement outlined just as a statement. Because as you said, who are we to judge? Who knows? No one can truly fully grasp someone else's conditions and mindset.
Agreed.
And
Yeah,
Rabbi, and then on the other side of that coin, we have Daniel Pearl,
that's
who,
right.
in the most difficult circumstances one could possibly imagine,
Yeah,
your life literally on the line,
yeah,
declares his Jewishness.
that's right. Just before he was beheaded by evil terrorists,
Yeah.
he proclaimed to the world. He could have maybe said, and there's so many examples with hostages today also, but Daniel Pearl, if I recall correctly, thank you for mentioning that example, that just before he was beheaded, he said, I am a Jew, my mother is a Jew, my father is a Jew, and my grandfather was a rabbi who has a street named after him in Bnei Brak. Proclaiming to the world very loudly, he could have just said, I'm a Jew, but I'm the Jew of Jews. And it's really something astounding. There's many examples like this. You know, one of the hostages that was released now after 732 or 42 days in captivity, part of the last hostages that were released is Ron Braslovsky. And it really, I don't know of an example like this in Jewish history. I really don't. But Ron Braslovsky was faced with die or live, that question each and every day, because these evil terrorists would prepare for him a delicious meal every day, That's what he says. And every day they would tell him, look, we can feed you, which, they had no food. They lived maybe on half a pita a day. But we can feed you and we can maybe even release you if you just convert to Islam. Every day for 742 days, however long that was. And every single day, people did it once in their lives. Many heroes did it once in their lives throughout history. But yeah, you like Daniel Poe is an example. Yeah, you have an example of someone doing it repetitively, each and every single day, in spite of his horrific starvation and unfathomable, cruel, torturous conditions. He said, "No, I'm staying a Jew. I'm a Jew. I'm a Jew." I mean, there's no greater hero than that. It's like really brings me to the brink of tears every time. And that's a real tzaddik. That's a real hero. And that's where you see also that fifth level of the neshama really just bursting forth. And if you could do that under these conditions, how much more so? We're speaking about not just ideas here, but ideas that should be translated into action. So if you can do that, who are we not to? Thank God we're not faced with the same conditions. So show up with our truest divine self, that divine self that wants to do good, even when we don't feel like it. That divine self that wants to learn Torah, pray, do that mitzvah, love, connect, better the world altogether, each in our own way, each with our own skills and talents. But that's what it's about, as Ron, as Daniel Pearl, and so many others have shown us. Yeah.
Rabbi,
Yes.
the paragraph we just read,
Yeah.
puzzled by the sentence, he wrote, any Jew who converts demonstrates that he is not, in essence, Jewish. So, but then, I mean, it seemed to be a contradiction, but then he says that there is a spark of Jewish holiness. I don't understand this sentence here.
Look, it's a tough sentence to understand, and I think particularly because I can't think of an example I really can't think of an example like that. I know we read of Jews converting. I know of a Jew converted too, even year, but the conversion is again fueled by all sorts of reasons, some that we know about, some that we don't know about. And each and every time that these Jews, as we've mentioned, were faced with death or with like an incredible awakening, then they would return to Judaism. Maybe the most famous example, maybe I don't know if it's a good example, but it's famous because the person is famous, is Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan in the 80s converted, and he had a spiritual awakening. There's a whole story about him going to the Lubavitcher Rebbe thereafter, and the Rebbe not even noticing him. Literally not noticing him. In the Hasidic gathering, the Hasidic Farbrengen, they actually told the Rebbe, you should know that Bob Dylan is now coming back to Judaism, and he'll be here. Do whatever you want with that information. And the Rebbe was looking for him at the Farbrengen. The Rebbe would notice everybody. And he didn't notice him. So he was kind of hurt. And then the rabbi of Bob Dylan, Manis Friedman, become, I think, YouTube's most popular rabbi, had an idea. He said, maybe that's because now that you're back, with us, but you didn't go to the mikveh, you got to cleanse yourself. So he went to the mikveh. He went back to Farbrengen the following week, and the Rebbe immediately noticed him and said a big l'chaim with a big smile to him. But whatever the story is, but you have your Jew who maybe was in it for a little bit, and I don't know what Christianity, Catholicism, I don't know exactly what he converted to, but it's documented. And some point he came back. I don't think, again, we have an example of true converts of Jews to any other religion. I'll share with you just one quick story, just again to emphasize this fifth level of the soul. There's a story also that was published in so many books over the years, but about a Jew who converted in the times of Nachmanides, before the Inquisition, in the 1200s. And he was a student of Nachmanides, a big sage. And at one point, something snapped, and he went to convert to Catholicism. I think it was also for wealth and fame. And he was so enmeshed in whatever he converted that he also decided to fight Judaism. And he became, he grew in the ranks of society, and he became very powerful. And one year on Yom Kippur, he summoned his teacher, Nachmanides, to come to his home. And Nachmanides could not say no, otherwise he would be killed or something like that. So he comes to his home and he sees his former student, imagine, having a barbecue with pork
Oh my
on
God.
Yom Kippur. And Nachmanides says to him, I don't understand. Why did you become like this? And the student says, that's because you said that everything can be found in the portion of Ha'azinu, which is the second to last portion of the Torah. And I don't believe that. Nachmanides says, I stand by my words. I'll prove it to you. The man says, well, my Hebrew name was Avner. Find me Avner in the portion of Ha'azinu. And without skipping a beat, the great rabbi Nachmanides says, well, Avner can be found in the verse that says, Amarti afehem ashbita me'enosh zichram. If you take the third letter of those words, then you can spell out the word Avner. Okay? No, sorry, you can spell out the word Reb Avner. Resh and then Avner. Avner was so taken aback that he tells Nachmanides, gosh, now I want to do teshuvah. I'm so sorry. What can I do? So Nachmanides says, well, then you have to fulfill what the verse says about you. That verse says that you will disappear. That day, Avner disappeared. Now, the big question to Nachmanides well, this guy fought Judaism, converted and everything. Why did you find the words in the Torah that say Reb Avner, like as if he was a rabbi, Reish? And Nachmanides says that's exactly the point, that within every Jew there's a Reb. There's that fifth level of the soul. And for some reason, sometimes we ignore it and we even fight it, just like he did. But when a person is able to finally reveal it, then he realizes that he was a Reb all the time. Even this Avner was a Reb. Anyway, that's the story. So that's why I don't know of any real examples like that. I really don't. And there are many converts, but I don't know of any examples. So I think this sentence is more theoretical than anything.